Hello and welcome back to Arts of Hermes. After a seemingly endless series of delays, finally back with the third and final part of the video here on Leonora Carrington. So today we'll be focused almost exclusively on her novel, The Hearing Trumpet, definitely her most well-known and most celebrated, also my personal favorite of her writings. So yeah, excited to talk about The Hearing Trumpet. And then just to finish off at the end, we can talk a little bit just briefly about some suggested further readings and study, and then we can close out by talking about how to make a surrealist survival kit. All right, so let's just jump right into it here. So The Hearing Trumpet was published in 1974, but it was written about a quarter of a century earlier. Susan Aberth suggests that the manuscript was completed in 1950 or thereabouts. So it would have been written just a few years after The Stone Door was completed, although it was actually published first. The Stone Door wasn't published until, was it 76? I think a couple years after The Hearing Trumpet. So similarly long delay between the writing and publication. That time frame for the writing also makes it clear that her engagement, although she continued to write short stories, at least through the 1970s, maybe a few in the 1980s, I'm not remembering now, but her engagement with longer form writings really takes place through the 1940s, so beginning with Down Below in, 43, and then The Stone Door a few years later, and then finally The Hearing Trumpet at the end of the decade, and probably completing in about 1950. We see a fairly short period of time where she's working with these longer form literary works here. And, one way of reading The Hearing Trumpet would be to see it as the culmination or the final development of her engagement with these longer sort of forms. And we will certainly see a lot of development of and resonance with those previous narratives. And yeah, it would be certainly possible to read it as the kind of culmination of that engagement. Also reading it as something that takes place or that's written that early in her career, we can also see it setting out, perhaps crystallizing or maybe even clarifying for her a lot of the themes and ideas and images that she will continue to develop in her written work, as well as some of the shorter writings, or even in that essay from, was that 1970, What is a Woman, that we looked at in part 2. We can already see a lot of those ideas and themes here in The Hearing Trumpet. All right, so let's see. The narrative of The Hearing Trumpet is, compared to The Stone Door, is much simpler, much more straightforward, and closer to a more linear, conventional narrative where we have, characters that continue all the way throughout the story, and at least some more linear kind of cause and effect structuring of the narrative, though as we go along, things become increasingly surreal, increasingly dreamlike, and especially in the final sort of third or so of the book, we have new characters being introduced fairly suddenly, events occurring without any sense of a kind of rational cause and effect order. And that progression from something much closer to it's never exactly realistic, but something closer to a realistic sort of novel, to something much more fantastic and dreamlike, I think we can also read as connected to the themes of transformation, and really profound transformation, both of the individual and of the world, and our understanding of humanity and our place in nature, and even of the nature of reality. I think that progression itself, that kind of formal progression from something closer to a realist novel into a more full-blown surrealism, certainly something that we can interpret as part of the nature and some significance of the text. It does mean that also that I know some people have, I've seen reviews online of people who became frustrated with the fact that their understanding of the linear plot line sort of began to break down, or they felt like things didn't resolve or didn't quite make sense in the end. So it's also important just to realize that although the earlier parts of the novel might suggest something like a more linear, traditional sort of narrative, we will ultimately be frustrated if we read it expecting a kind of conventional plot sort of resolution. In particular, I think they're also pointing towards that sort of suggestion of a more conventional narrative, but then also the subversion of that, is that the main character, especially towards the end, becomes just one of a group, does not play any. She participates in important events, but really just becomes one of a whole collective that includes both a group of humans and non-human agents as well, some of whom act quite sort of independently. And we don't get anything like a sort of hero's kind of narrative, although we do see personal transformation that she undergoes. The other characters undergo essentially the same sort of transformation. So we also have kind of a subversion of that expectation that our protagonist will be the the primary agent who produces the various transformations. And again, there's a number of other agents and important characters who simply enter the story and are already engaged in their project and don't, although they interact with our protagonist, are not reliant on her agency for their own work. So she becomes a participant in something larger than any single individual's action, which I think that too really resonates with a lot of the themes we'll be talking about here. All right, so we're not going to spend really much time talking about the storyline or worrying about the sort of individual characters and their stories, but instead we'll organize our discussion here around themes and images and symbols, especially as they relate to things that we developed in the first two parts. So certainly taking a good look at some of the esoteric content in the novel, which is substantial. I mean, we see magic, quite a bit of alchemy, some astrological references as well. Certainly a very hermetic work here, and we'll unpack some of that, as well as ecofeminism and identity, and some of the other themes that we've already talked about in Carrington's work. So our basic plotline, we are set somewhat in the future. It's almost kind of secretly a science fiction novel. So we are set somewhat in the future, at least of the time that it was written. So our protagonist is Marion Leatherby, an elderly woman who is sent by her family to live at a quite unusual nursing home. While there, a sort of global catastrophe begins to unfold where the poles of the Earth have shifted out of alignment, and essentially the Earth's axis has turned on its side, drastically altering sort of weather patterns and really creating a kind of global cataclysm. While this is happening, Marion and some of the other women that she becomes friends with in the nursing home uncover a sort of narrative of an 18th century nun, an abbess, and her storyline, her extremely heretical nun, and her search for the Holy Grail. She's a kind of magician and a worshiper of the goddess, and her search for the Holy Grail, which Marion and the other characters in the sort of present day, or the future, the main just kind of framing narrative, they complete this quest and recover the Grail and return it to the goddess to whom it truly belongs, which, well, we'll see how that not exactly averts the catastrophe that's happening, but I think changes its meaning and its understanding. And along the way, we get kind of a number of other kind of diversions and sort of side narratives and a number of other sort of characters that enter. But that's our basic narrative, including that substantial narrative inside of the main narrative involving the 18th century nun, Donna Rosalinda. All right, so I've got a list of just some of the themes that we'll be talking about here. Definitely not a complete list of the content of the novel. There's certainly other readings that could follow out different other thematic threads throughout the text and develop those as well. But just some of the themes that we get, and about half of these or so will really develop throughout the rest of this video here. But I just wanted to mention them all here because they do all, I think, in a really beautiful and compelling way interact and intersect with each other in a way that if we sort of squint at the narrative a bit, we do get a pretty coherent, sort of vision and worldview throughout our journey through the text. All right, and a lot of these will be quite familiar from what we've already talked about in the first two parts of the video. So first, we see a lot of feminist, and in particular ecofeminist themes throughout the story. With that ecofeminism, we really see this resonating and I think developing what we talked about with the stone door and this kind of mythic narrative of a patriarchal authority or a patriarchal kind of spiritual authority that governs or runs the world that needs to be replaced and that we need to have an order that at least includes, if not is driven by women. In connection to this, we see a lot of themes of the goddess religion that we've already talked about with Carrington. Her interest in the writings of people like Robert Graves and Gerald Gardner, Wicca, the goddess movement. We also see quite a bit of mythology throughout the story, in particular goddesses drawn from different mythological traditions. I think there's actually a really interesting and really like productive ambiguity about whether the various goddesses that we see or hear about throughout or are kind of interacted with or touched upon in some way by the narrative, whether these are all just varying faces or aspects of a single great goddess, idea that you would find in Wicca and some other goddess traditions, that there's a kind of singular goddess who appears under many different guises, or whether we really are in a kind of polytheistic universe here. And I think it's not resolved, but that non-resolution is itself, I think, something really really productive and compelling about the story and speaks to Carrington's own interests. As always with Carrington, I think she's a lot more interested in questions and thematic development of ideas rather than anything like a kind of settled worldview, especially when it comes to spiritual or esoteric matters. And we certainly have that attitude comes through in our text here. In connection with some of that ecofeminist themes that we saw, we also get what I'm at least calling here a kind of anti-humanism or a kind of anti-anthropocentrism, maybe we could say instead, or really taking humanity down by a peg and criticism of or dethroning of the human sort of arrogance to thinking that we are the masters of the world or the center or highest of the creation or on this planet. That really comes under attack, and I think is really linked together with some of those ecofeminist and anti-patriarchal feminist themes as well in a very compelling way. Also connected to that, we have quite a bit of satire and ridicule of various forms of spiritual authority, both institutional spiritual authority, especially in the narrative within the narrative about the 18th century nun. There's quite a bit of ridicule and attack of the patriarchal authority of the Catholic Church. In the main narrative involving Marion Leatherby in the nursing home, this satire is of the director of the nursing home runs, or the nursing home itself is a kind of sort of spiritual order, which is very clearly modeled around the Fourth Way teachings, the teachings of G.I. Gurdjieff, which Carrington herself participated in Mexico City. And so here that is pretty thoroughly satirized throughout the story. But even outside of a specifically institutionalized framework, we get sort of satire and ridicule and attack of anyone who sets themselves up as in any way spiritually superior or advanced. We do have a very real, genuine spirituality that emerges throughout the story, but it is definitely set up in opposition to any kind of superiority or any kind of hierarchical relationship, which definitely really resonates with a lot of those ecofeminist and anti-humanist sort of themes that we've been talking about here. And in particular, we'll see this kind of feminist revolt against the authority, which is very connected to both to magical and alchemical themes as well. Definitely resonating with some of the themes we talked about in the previous or a couple videos back. We did that long 3-part video on surrealism. Definitely see some of those same ideas of the esoteric being connected to a kind of attitude of revolt and revolution against domineering order of authority. We also have throughout the novel themes of sensual pleasure against asceticism. The ascetic attitudes and the denial of pleasure and the denial of the body are very linked to those spiritual authorities, both the directors of the nursing home and their kind of fourth way-esque teachings, as well as the Catholic Church, and the sort of sensual pleasures and the pleasures and the importance of the body are emphasized instead, and connected to those that revolt and some of those ecofeminist themes. We also see, as in a lot of Carrington's works, themes of androgyny. We also have repeated instances of characters disguising themselves as men disguising themselves as women disguising themselves as men, and some androgynous figures. The goddess herself appears in androgynous form. A lot of this is related to the alchemical androgyne, and that idea of the union or unification of the male and female into an androgynous being. We've already talked about some of those themes in connection with the stone door and in some of her paintings. As we mentioned, this is really an apocalyptic narrative, and as we'll see, this apocalypse is linked to nuclear war through a few details that we get throughout the story. And then overall, we also just see quite a bit of the themes of transformation, transmutation, metamorphosis, both of individuals who undergo, Marion and the other women undergo a kind of alchemical transformation and renewal, but also the transformation of the world and the world order connected to that sort of revolt against authority and a kind of a sort of revolution against these systems of patriarchal and ecocidal authority. All right, so we'll start off here taking a look at some of especially the early indications of the presence of the signs of the goddess in the narrative, who she is really present all the way through the story, even long before it becomes obvious that the return of the goddess to the world and the return of the grail, the return of the goddess's cup to her is really the central idea or the central kind of event around which the entire text turns. And also, I think it's worth appreciating that the protagonist, Marion Leatherby, she is already oriented towards goddess worship, even if only in a very small and very personal way early on. Similar, we'll see in just a moment, or we can flip to it right now. Here she is praying to the planet Venus, but we also see her really concerned with the well-being of her cats and with the red hen, as well as her friend Carmela here, who there's some autobiographical elements in this narrative as well, and Carmela is definitely modeled after Carrington's friend Remedios Varo. But yeah, her concern, not just for others, but for animals here, and her orientation towards goddess worship. Although they begin here in this, sort of small, humble, very personal sort of way, will eventually be developed into something of really planetary and world historical significance here. And I think that's an interesting way of looking at her transformation, that it's not that she has to awaken, concern for something that she previously didn't understand or didn't have a relation to, but rather the expansion of her understanding of the significance of these things towards which she was already oriented is, I think, an interesting way that the progression and development of these ideas takes place. So yeah, in this, so she's just found out. This quotation here is from before she's sent to the nursing home. She's just found out that her family is going to be sending her there. I think also it's interesting to see the way that now her family doesn't have any they don't value her. They don't value what she has to say. They find her presence just a kind of burden or an irritation that they want to rid themselves of, and that I think is definitely related to them not valuing her, orientation towards the well-being of animals, or her interest in the goddess or the stars. All of these things are, like elderly women generally, are things that the mainstream kind of culture, the patriarchal order, doesn't value and doesn't have a place for, but will later be revealed as the key towards to transforming the world, and ultimately the continuation of all life on Earth. Let's see. Also in this quote, she refers to the Well of Light Brotherhood. That is the spiritual order or organization that runs the nursing home that she's being sent to. Let's see. So anyway, she says, the cats. What will become of the cats? Then Carmela. What about Carmela on a Monday morning? And the red hen? And why do they suppose they know that one is better off dead? And how can they possibly know that? And oh dear Venus. I always pray to Venus. She is such a brilliant and recognizable star. What is the Well of Light Brotherhood? That sounds more terrifying than death itself. A brotherhood with the grim knowledge of what is better for other people and the iron determination to better them, whether they like it or not. Oh Venus, what have I done to deserve this? And what about the cats? What will become of Marmine and Cha-Cha? All right, and then there's many other examples of Venus and the planet Venus appearing, especially early on in the narrative, worth paying attention to, and similar with the moon. So here's just one example. Now this appearance of the moon here is actually taking place within a dream that one of the other characters, one of the other women in the nursing home is having. Dreams, as I think I briefly mentioned, are quite important throughout the story, and a lot of information and really important, significant information is revealed through dreams. Characters have dreams that relate to each other or foreshadow things that are later going to happen. And yet dreams, although the narrative itself becomes increasingly dreamlike as we go on, and dreams play a major role in the progression and development of the story. So anyways, this is another one of the characters relating a dream that she's had. So she says, a light wind rustles the leaves of the birch trees. The air is fresh and cool. As I stroll along, I become aware that I have a purpose, and soon with a thrill of joy, I know what it is. I must find a magic cup, hidden somewhere in the wood. Then I come upon a marble statue of Diana and her dogs. She is half covered with moss and strides perpetually through the forest. The cup lies at the foot of the statue. It is a silver chalice brimming over with golden honey. I sip the honey and return the cup to Diana with a thankful prayer. Or rather, it is not quite like that. I make an attempt to sip the honey, but it is too thick and I have to look around for a spoon. There are no spoons, so after I lick the rim of the chalice, I return it, still nearly full of honey, to the goddess, and then I say my prayer of thanks. So this, the cup filled with honey and its return to the goddess are all really, the central event of the story, though appearing here long before we realize or understand the significance of it on our first read through. We see Diana here, the moon goddess, appearing, another face or image of the goddess here in the story. Also, we get some clearly kind of mythological reference to the story of Actaeon, though obviously quite modified here as well. All right, and now we can take a look at the narrative within the narrative. So this is the story of the Abbess Rosalinda Alvarez Cruz de la Cueva, who initially appears as the winking nun in a painting that is hung inside of the nursing home, and Marian becomes very intrigued, even obsessed with this painting and the winking nun that appears in it. Initially, Marian actually invents this name as a kind of fanciful name for the woman in the painting, and then it's later revealed that this is actually the woman's real name. Another example of dreams and imagination, bringing forth or revealing true information. So Marian eventually is given access to a written document that occupies a good sort of chunk of the novel. This is a story written by the abbess, also referred to as Donna Rosalinda, written by her confessor, which we get a nice kind of sort of unreliable kind of narrator here, and some nice opportunities for irony, where the priest, the confessor writing the story, is rather horrified by the sort of blasphemous and heretical things that Donna Rosalinda gets up to. interesting kind of literary effect, all these various levels of framing. And then even within this narrative being written by the confessor, we have letters and some other documents that are then quoted inside of that. So a lot of layering of texts inside of texts, which is something we already saw Carrington doing quite a bit in the Stone Door. So we have some of the reoccurrence of that literary technique here. Let's see. So we'll read a handful of quotations from the confessor's narrative, as well as some of the other texts that appear inside of the confessor's account. Let's see. So here we have him writing, "A rose is a secret. A beautiful rose is a great lady's secret. A cross is the parting or joining of the ways. This is the meaning of Abbess Rosalinda Alvarez Cruz de la Cueva's name. The canonization of the abbess was performed after certain extraordinary events witnessed by reliable dignitaries of the Church before and after her death in the year of our Lord Jesus Christ, 1733, in the month of July. She was buried in the crypt of the convent of Santa Barbara of Tartarus with the ceremonies and benedictions of our Mother, the Holy Catholic Church, ab eo quod nigrum caudam habet abstine terrestrium enum diorum est." All right, let's see, just a few comments here. Interestingly, in her name, we have both the rose and the cross appearing here, so we can certainly read this as a Rosicrucian reference, to the order of the rose and cross. Though here, being, as always with Carrington, those symbols are given their own significance and their own interpretation. As we've already seen her doing with all sorts of esoteric traditions previously. Now we get this sort of interpretation of at least parts of her name. So that's the Rosalinda and Cruz, is the rose and cross there. No particular significance to the name Alvarez, but the De La Cueva would be of the cave. So we get cave images here. We also have this the convent of Santa Barbara of Tartarus. Tartarus, of course, is part of the Greek underworld, in the closest aspect of that to the Christian hell. It's a place of torment and suffering here. But these we get repeated images of the underworld and underground spaces, which will be developed and understood in a much deeper way as a place of initiation and transformation as the story goes on. Let's see. Other things we could say there, but I just want to take a look at another painting of Carrington's here, where this Latin phrase that we got there at the end, which actually, at least in my version of the novel, there's a slight typo. The third to last word should be enum, E-N-I-M, not E-O-I-M. So this phrase, this Latin phrase, which Carrington derived, was quoted in one of Carl Jung's, I forget which one now. Jung wrote a few books on alchemy. In one of his books, he quotes from an obscure, I think it's like 14th century alchemical manuscript. And so Carrington got the quotation there through Jung's book. So anyways, the quote translates to, "Stay away from anything that has a black tail, for it belongs to the terrestrial gods." And terrestrial gods here are really which not in the sort of Christian sense, but could also be referred to as the demons, not evil things, but terrestrial, chthonic, subterranean beings. And we also see, this might be difficult to see on your screen here, but this same phrase appears on the fire screen that we see in the left in this painting, which is titled Ab Eo Quod, from the first 3 words of the quotation. So we see the quotation written out on the fire screen on the left. We also see a number of alchemical images here. On the center of the table, we have the egg and a white rose dripping dew from above onto the egg. So a very clearly, alchemical symbol there. This sort of spiritual dew or sort of supernal, essence being dripped down onto the alchemical egg. In the background, we also see these murals on the wall. We see various black and white figures, human-animal hybrids, all things we've seen before. The black and white, as the union or conjunction of opposites. Including on the right there, we see a black male head and a white female head sort of conjoined together. We also have another image of a rose on the wall there, and some other sort of esoteric and mythological references there. Underneath the table, we also see another version of that dark or kind of shadowy figure that we saw in a number of her paintings. We also see the three alchemical colors of white, black, and red, both on the walls and in the scene. So we have the white rose and the white egg. We also have the glasses of red wine there, and then the black creature under the table. And of course, in the quote, we also have anything that has a black tail. And we see the fire screen itself actually has a black tail. And the way that tail is drawn is clearly linked to the appearance of the creature under the table. So again, the sort of black, white, and red. The appearance of the wine on the table. Interesting blending of a scene of alchemical like transformation and ritual with a domestic scene as well here. This is not just kind of alchemical scene, but also a dinner table, and we see food and wine laid on the table. So there might be a reference to the Christian Eucharist in the appearance of the wine, but also wine is just an item of indulgence or pleasure appearing here as well. We also see some fruits on the table, including a pomegranate. And there are several references to pomegranates throughout the novel. Pomegranates, of course, are associated in mythological terms, associated with Persephone, who is abducted by Hades and taken to the underworld, and eventually becomes queen of the underworld. So goddess, relevance there, particularly an underworld goddess, relevant to what we've been talking about there. Also in this painting, we have butterflies, and some of which on the ground appear to be emerging, and moths maybe as well, appear to be emerging out of their cocoons. So images of transmutation and transformation appearing here as well. All right, and then we'll take a look at a few of the descriptions within the confessor's narrative of Donna Rosalinda's, her chambers, her library, and some of her practices. So let's see, we read, scarlet silk studded with little purple and gold griffins constituted the wall hangings in these chambers. The furniture, made of dark odoriferous wood, was carved like all the beasts in creation. Brocade, gorgeously embroidered toreador capes dripped casually from the abbess's throne, which was carved with her own emblem of swords and pomegranates. Parquet floors of ebony and white magnolia wood inlaid with silver angels and bronze medallions of the apostles was the sumptuous ground under Donna Rosalinda's small feet. There was something disquieting that such holy beings should be constantly trodden upon by the abbess. So we see this kind of blasphemous, walking on the images of the saints and angels, but at the same time we have mythological creatures like griffins on the walls, and the furniture is carved into all the beasts in creation. Her turning away from Christianity and towards a much more pagan kind of worldview here, and of course we also have the pomegranate reference here as well. All right, a little bit later we read, Rosalinda, who had extensive knowledge of herbs, installed a small dispensary in the convent where she performed many successful cures. I am now tempted to think that Rosalinda's prayers were more in the nature of incantations, and that she was well versed in witchcraft before she ever entered the convent. Rosalinda alone attended the old abbess on her deathbed, and who knows by what black powers she obtained the title of abbess even before the poor lady had expired. After the death of the old abbess, the convent routine underwent many changes invisible to the world outside the walls of the convent. Spiritual supervision of the nuns was in charge of the Bishop of Trèves-les-Frères. Nobody would have dared criticize anything approved by such a high dignitary of the church. In the darkest hours of the night, the convent chapel became the scene of orgiastic dancing and strange chants in unknown tongues. Weird costumes, pageantry, and feasting became the order of the day at the convent of Santa Barbara. So this bishop mentioned here, he's sort of in on this whole thing, and is even a lover of the abbess, and participates later on in the story in her searching for the Holy Grail, which is eventually revealed to be in the possession of the Knights Templar. And then just continuing on, we read, her books were bound with the hides of various animals according to their specific contents. Special manuscripts would be bound with ostrich skin or wolf hide. A breviary of more frivolous nature might be clad with ermine fur or moleskin. A Kabbalistic document by Agrippa von Nettesheim was clad in rhinoceros horn delicately engraved with the horoscope of Queen Hatshepsut. The Liber Spiritum and the Grimoire Verum were covered with dodo skins covered with small rubies and seed pearls. All right, so we have some references here to some real esoteric texts. Agrippa von Nettesheim, the Kabbalistic document here being referred to is probably his 3 books of occult philosophy, his most significant work and really a central text in the Western esoteric tradition. This idea that it's engraved with the horoscope of Queen Hatshepsut is an interesting kind of embellishment that, as if the magic, that Agrippa is presenting is being linked, not just to ancient Egypt, which is, a really common trope, and one with some real actual historical justification, that the Western esoteric tradition, comes out of or issues forth from Egypt, and that's the sort of the source of the Western magical tradition. Again, with a certain amount of actual, historical validity there. But also that it's being linked specifically to one of the early female pharaohs here as well, is a nice touch, as if giving a kind of ancient, female provenance for, the magic of these, these Renaissance men. The Grimoire Verum is a real Solomonic grimoire. There's a few different texts that I think have been referred to as the Liber Spiritum, or have names similar to that. So I'm not quite sure if Carrington has a specific text in mind here with that reference. But yeah, both Goetic and Solomonic grimoires being referenced here. All right, and then in the very slightly later quotation here, he writes, "Indeed, she spent most of her days locked in her apartments, studying these volumes and writing long commentaries on many a strip of the finest parchment. At nightfall, she would mount the spiral staircase to the observatory, where she manipulated her forbidden knowledge with I know not what magic, induced by the celestial bodies of the stars." All right, so here we have a reference not just to astrology and magic, but to astrological magic, which, Agrippa's 3 books of occult philosophy is very centrally concerned with the practice of astrological magic and the transmission of that tradition, which really does have roots that can be traced, not exactly linearly or directly, but can be traced back to ancient Egypt. And, again, resonating with that, some of those, the significance of the planet Venus and the moon here as well, now being connected to this tradition of astrological magic here as well. All right, and now we can take a look at some of the descriptions and other things connected to the Holy Grail throughout the text, which, other than that, the dream that we already saw where a magic cup appears, the Holy Grail is first mentioned inside the narrative, the story about Donna Rosalinda. So Donna Rosalinda disguises herself as a man and journeys to Ireland. Now in this story here, Carrington's working with this sort of fictional idea that some of the Knights Templar survived their destruction in the 14th century, and maintained a stronghold in Ireland. So Donna Rosalinda disguised as a man, journeys to the stronghold, and is now writing. This is a letter that's quoted inside of the text being written by the confessor. She's writing a letter to the bishop about, updating him on her progress in the search for the Grail. So she writes, "One evening the boy Angus, having partaken of more wine than was prudent for one of such tender years, confided to me the grand arcanum, the great secret of the order, or rather the living symbol of such. He let me understand that the Knights Templar in Ireland were in possession of the Grail. This wonderful cup, as you know, was said to be the original chalice which held the elixir of life and belonged to the goddess Venus. She is said to have quaffed the magic liquid when she was impregnated with Cupid, whereupon he leapt in the womb and, absorbing the pneuma, became a god." So pneuma means spirit, and is used as whether this is another name for the elixir of life or the magic liquid, which, as we will see, will be connected to honey, or it's something like a subtler spiritual essence resident inside of the physical liquid, is not exactly clear. But yeah, in any case, let's see, she continues. The story follows that Venus, in her birth pangs, dropped the cup, and it came hurtling to earth, where it was buried in a deep cavern, abode of Epona, the horse goddess. Epona, I may be mispronouncing that. I'm not really actually familiar with her. She's a Celtic goddess associated with horses, who becomes, just sort of one more goddess or another face of the goddess, if we want to, interpret it in that way. All right, and then she continues on her letter. For some thousands of years, the cup was safely in the keeping of the subterranean goddess, who was known to be bearded and a hermaphrodite. Her name was Barbarous. So more subterranean images here, linked to the goddess. Also, hermaphroditism and androgyny, another theme here. And bearded as well, which is interesting. Actually, Marion Leatherby, early on in the story, she's grown kind of a wispy sort of beard that she's quite proud of. So there's interesting association between, just this sort of facial hair grown by an elderly woman, and this idea of the subterranean goddess as the kind of magical androgyne, who's unifying male and female. Which is quite interesting. And her name Barbarous here is, of course, the Santa Barbara de Tartarus, was the order of nuns that Dona Rosalinda was connected to. We'll see. I don't think I actually have the quote in here, but later that name Barbarous is also associated with like barbarian, that same root, and associated with the foreign stranger, which is another kind of theme that we get throughout the story, which is possibly a foreshadowing of Marion and the other women, and their eventual returning of the Grail. But it's that those sort of connections are not exactly clear in the story, at least not to me. In any case, she continues on her letter. It is possible that you have heard the legend before. I must say I found the name most striking through obvious associations. The goddess Barbara was worshipped as the life-giver or womb, and her priests were generally supposed to be chosen hermaphrodites. Seth, the son of Noah, was supposed to be the first to march upon the sanctuary of this goddess. The priests were murdered and the Grail was stolen, the sanctuary desecrated. According to the legend, the Grail lay in the hands of the tribe of Seth and was stolen in turn by the Knights Templar during the Crusade. Later stories sprang up around the Grail, and its magic was erroneously attributed to Christian sources. So now we have this myth developed about how the forces of male, patriarchal spiritual authority have seized the Grail of the goddess here. All right, and then she continues on in her story here. We won't look at all of it here, but just one line here that resonates with the painting that we saw in, I think that was in the second part, the painting The Magdalens, where we talked about this, the appearance of Mary Magdalene there, or the association with her in that painting. Here we read Dona Rosalinda writing, "You may imagine the transports of delight which overcame me when I learnt that Magdalene had been a high initiate of the mysteries of the goddess, but had been executed for the sacrilege of selling certain secrets to the cult of Jesus of Nazareth." And then goes on to suggest that the miracles performed by Jesus were just related to his attaining some of the magic liquid from the Grail through Mary Magdalene, and that all of his so basically the origin of the Christian religion and Jesus's miracles are actually a kind of just a sort of stolen magic from this kind of primordial goddess religion. Which is obviously an extraordinarily blasphemous and heretical thing for the abbess of a convent to be writing. It's pretty good. All right, and then here we have a text that appears inside of the account being written by the priest, Dona Rosalinda's confessor here. So this is a text that he says that he found among her papers after her death, which was written in Hebrew and is here being translated. And in a nice touch here, we can see Carrington putting glosses or insertions in brackets into the text, kind of in the style of academic translations of ancient texts here. And yeah, we get a lot of kind of core images and connections being made here, though it also remains a quite enigmatic text. There are a few references here that are never really explained, and how a few things join up with the main narrative is not really clear. I think, again, we can't expect always like linear or perfectly consistent connections here, but we have to kind of squint our eyes and understand the kind of symbolic, sort of surreal dream logic that really governs the whole thing, and that includes down, and maybe even most especially to this really spiritual and esoteric symbolism that we see, in here in this text. All right, so we can just read through it, and on this screen and the next one, I've got the text here, and I'll just make a few comments as we go along, and then some of these ideas will develop more as we go throughout the rest of the video. All right, so we read, "He, the sinner, shall not be absolved by expiations, nor by the lustral waters of sea and river. He called Set out of the tribe of Egypt shall be called unclean throughout the ages, until the cup of Pneuma shall return unto the daughters called Ariouth of Tartarian." So Set here is, now this is most directly a reference to the Egyptian god Set, the enemy of Horus, associated with the desert and the forces of chaos, but is also here being linked with or identified with Seth, who is at least in this version of the mythology, is the son of Noah, who stole the Grail, and is here is unclean because he stole the cup, the Grail that belonged to the goddess. There's a reference at the end here to the daughters called Ariouth of Tartarian. It's never really explained who these daughters are exactly. The Tartarian is obviously a version of the word Tartaros, the underworld that we already saw here. But yeah, not exactly clear who they are. Some sort of order, perhaps devoted to or dedicated to the goddess and her mysteries. All right, continuing on, we read that all his Set iniquities shall be atoned for by the submission of his soul to the female foreign stranger, otherwise translated as Barbara. So as I was referring to, the Barbara being sort of traced back to that root like barbarian or barbarous, meaning foreign. To the female foreign stranger, who shall once more replenish the cup with the holy Pneuma by a ritual joining to the yellow or golden horned god, keeper of the most holy vessel. So some of this idea of the horned god as the consort, or lover of the goddess, like from the Wiccan tradition. Being referred to here. The horned god is usually identified with Cernunnos, the Celtic horned deity here. Continuing on, we read, at the beginning, the two spirits, which are known as twins, are the one female and the other male. They established at the beginning life, the Pneuma and the holy cup to hold the Pneuma. And when these two spirits met, such was the manner of the birth of the winged one, or the feathered hermaphrodite Sephira. So here we have interesting kind of development of this sort of Wiccan or neo-pagan idea of the goddess and her consort, here being associated to something like the alchemical union, of the male and the female, and here the creation, of the alchemical the winged alchemical androgyne here, which is an interesting kind of extension of that goddess symbolism into a much more hermetic, sort of an alchemical sort of territory. And we'll follow up with some of those references and to this idea of the feathered hermaphrodite Sephira, who will make an appearance later in the text. All right, continuing on, we read, "For instance, the cup has not rendered fruit, the sterile jailers of the cup having banished her from her most rightful realm in the caverns of her most secret mysteries, Epona, Barbarous, Hecate." So Epona, we already saw, was the horse goddess who was the sort of keeper or holder of the Grail after Venus sort of dropped it from the heavens. Barbarous, another name for the sort of bearded or hermaphrodite goddess. And then Hecate, of course, a Greek deity, goddess associated with the underworld here. And then continuing on with the text, we read, "And the children of the planet will forget, and not find the path of the years, and will forget the new moons and the seasons, and they will go wrong as to all the order of time and of the running bodies in the heavens. They will thus perpetrate abominations, for the cup lies empty and sterile under the rule of Set, who is Yehovah, the Revenger. All right, so a few complicated things, but important things sort of happening here. So the cup lying empty and sterile, because it has been removed from the goddess, disconnect that sort of source of nourishment and magic and sort of spiritual essence and renewal, being separated from the goddess and in the hands of the patriarchal authority, also renders it empty and sterile. A theme we already talked about in connection to the stone door. And now here, this is also this disconnection from the goddess and from the divine feminine is a disconnection from the natural world, but also a disconnection from the celestial. Here we have the new moons and the seasons, both the solar and lunar cycles that are connected here to the natural cycles of the earth. This suggestion seems to be that this is in opposition to the kind of calendar that we use, which is something artificial and separated from these celestial natural cycles. So here we also get, I think, a nice kind of linking together of the association of the goddess and these sites of magic and renewal, with the earth and even the underworld and within the earth. But now that also being linked to the heavens and to the celestial bodies, to the moon and to Venus, as we already saw there. And yeah, again, just the suggestion that the disconnection from those cycles is I think in a way that really resonates with a lot of kind of Wiccan or neo-pagan sort of themes that Carrington was interested in. The disconnection from those things is in a way equivalent to or directly related to the the loss of the divine feminine and the forgetting of the goddess. Let's see, and because of this, we will perpetrate, abominations. Could certainly think about. We'll see. There's a reference to nuclear war in the novel, but just to ecological, destruction and the extinction of species and everything else that that Carrington was so concerned with, as well as things like the Second World War and the Holocaust, and all of these sort of things could absolutely be included with this idea of the abominations, that we will have perpetrated because of this sort of fallen spiritual state. And then finally, we have Set being linked here to the God of the God of the Old Testament, the God of the Hebrew Bible, the Yehovah, which is another rendering of the equivalent to Jehovah or Yahweh. Different ways of rendering the unpronounceable four-letter name, the Tetragrammaton from the Hebrew tradition. But yeah, now directly being linked to Set, who's here described as the Revenger. All right, continuing on, we read, "And when the 3 moons rise together and obscure the light of the sun, there will be lamentations and gnashing of bones, for they have forgotten their origin and no longer know the roots of the tree." So the 3 moons, if we want to continue this sort of Wiccan and neo-pagan interpretation, are often are emblems used of that goddess tradition. Usually we see a waxing moon, the full moon, the waxing moon, the full moon, and the waning moon. So certainly a goddess symbol here, and of course another lunar symbol. Obscuring the light of the sun, the solar, being linked to the god and that patriarchal order here. So here we have a kind of prophecy of the coming apocalypse and the transformation of the earth and the restoration of the goddess to her proper place here. Again, forgotten their origins, no longer know the roots of the tree, no longer know the source of life and spirituality, in the earth and in these these natural sources. Continuing on. "Behold, the wise one is robber of her holy vessel, which lies in bondage of the sterile brothers, which lies empty and forsaken of the most miraculous pneuma." Again, just elaborating some of those same themes that we've already seen. The sterile brothers just being a kind of general name, I think, here for Abrahamic religion or the patriarchal spiritual order. "Woe unto the children of earth who worship a trinity of men. Woe unto the sterile brothers who have torn the cup from her keeping." The Trinity of Men, obviously being a specific reference now to the Christian Trinity, and there being a problem, with the Christian Trinity being all male, of course, is related to some of what we talked about in connection with Down Below, and the idea of needing to a feminine figure or a feminine presence needing to be added. That the Christian Trinity needing to be amended by the inclusion of women within that order. All right, so now we can talk about the theme of apocalypse and social transformation in the novel. So we've already mentioned the global catastrophe that's happening because of the poles are changing places, as Carmela explains at one point in the novel. So although this is explicitly a catastrophe linked to nuclear war, as we'll see in a moment, and its effects are horrible and catastrophic. When the poles change places, Mexico, which is obviously normally a quite warm place, becomes a kind of Arctic landscape, and it is presented as a catastrophe. But at the same time, we also have the idea of apocalypse as the end of a particular social order. So this is also the end of the patriarchal era, and the return of the goddess to the world, and the possibility for life to continue. So it is both a moment of destruction and of renewal at the same time, which certainly resonates with alchemy, in the sense that the first matter has to be putrefied and destroyed and burnt up in the fire, that there has to be this period of destruction in order for the great work to proceed and be accomplished. And we see some of that here at the global scale. This also definitely resonates with some of the ideas that we talked about in the video on Alan Moore, with his, especially in Promethea, and the way that he develops the idea of apocalypse there as the end of an era, and something destructive and frightening, that also has the possibility of a new era and a new perception of the world and a new understanding of humanity's place within that world. All right, so there's a particularly important conversation between Carmela and Marion, the protagonist, where they discuss the apocalypse and some of these kind of social and even really political themes that are connected to it. So I really believe the poles are changing places, said Carmela. And then skipping just a little bit, she continues on with some of the effects that this will have. Flora and fauna of a tropical kind that were unable to adapt would perish. I feel most upset about the animals. Happily, most of them have fur that grows quickly, and carnivorous animals would have plenty of human beings to eat, all those who had not foreseen what was coming and died of exposure. It is all the fault of that dreadful atom bomb they were so proud of. So here we have the kind of explanation. This is one of just a couple of references to the idea that a nuclear war has occurred at some time in this sort of future timeline that we're getting here, and that somehow this has triggered the poles changing places. Of course, the climate suddenly becoming dark and cold, obviously connects to the possibility of nuclear winter. Let's see, continuing on. You mean we are entering another ice age? I asked, feeling far from happy. Why not? It happened before, said Carmela logically. I must say I do feel that it is poetic justice if all those horrible governments are frozen stark in their respective governmental palaces or parliaments. Actually, they always sit in front of their microphones, so there's a good chance that they might all get frozen to death. That would be a nice change, after pushing the poor nations to all slaughter ever since 1914. It is impossible to understand how millions and millions of people all obey a sickly collection of gentlemen that call themselves government. The word, I expect, frightens people. It is a form of planetary hypnosis, and very unhealthy. It has been going on for years, I said. It had only occurred to relatively few to disobey and make what they call revolutions. If they won their revolutions, which they occasionally did, they made more governments, sometimes more cruel and stupid than the last. Men are very difficult to understand, said Carmela. Let's hope they all freeze to death. I'm sure it would be very pleasant and healthy for human beings to have no authority whatever. They would have to think for themselves, instead of always being told what to do and think by advertisements, cinemas, policemen, and parliaments. All right, so here we have an expression of a really kind of anarchist sort of sentiment, although there's not a lot of explicit politics in Carrington's works, outside of the sort of ecofeminist themes that we've already been talking about, not a lot of like explicitly political statements. She did in an interview say that she basically believed in a form of peaceful anarchism. That was her, sort of understanding of her political position. And yeah, I think we certainly see that expressed here. I think it may be also significant that some of these words are being put into, that Carmela is saying some of these. As we said, Carmela is quite clearly based on Remedios Varo. And we know that, well, at least according to some accounts that I've read of Varo's life, she actually fought in the Spanish Civil War. So Varro ended up marrying the Surrealist poet Benjamin Paret, who we talked about in the Surrealism video, and he fought in the Spanish Civil War, both on the side of with the militia, the POUM, and then eventually he was sort of dissatisfied with them for various reasons, and then eventually joined the Durruti column following the anarchist Durruti. And at least in some versions of this story, I've heard that he was already he and Varro were already together at this time, that Varro actually fought with Durruti as well. All right, and then here we have a quotation from a fairly minor but interesting character in the story. This is the bard Taliesin, who actually links together the two different narratives. It's not explained exactly who or what he is, but he's some sort of supernatural or non-human agency, because he meets both Donna Rosalinda in the 18th century narrative, but then is still alive and meets Marion and the other women in the nursing home in the whatever it is, kind of late 20th century or thereabouts, the main narrative. Anyways, and he functions as something of a kind of messenger figure, a kind of messenger of the goddess, who assists in the recovery of the Grail. So, but I think it's just interesting. It's just a kind of detail in the story, but develops some of the kind of political and social vision that informs the narrative. So he says, now in the precincts of Hampstead Heath, there is a certain cavern used by a coven of witches who hold their ceremonies there in secret in order not to be molested by the law. From ancient times, the witches had danced in the cavern through wars and persecutions. Many a time when I was pursued, I would hide with the witches, and was always received with courtesy and kindness. As you are no doubt aware, my mission through the ages has been to carry uncensored news to the people, without consideration of either rank or status. This has made me unpopular with authorities all over the planet. My object is to help human beings to realize their state of slavery and exploitation by power-seeking beings. All right, so as we've already said and seen, there are numerous instances of alchemical imagery and references to alchemical transformation all throughout the story, and we'll even see a couple more going forward here. But I just want to take a look at the really kind of central sequence of alchemical transformation that occurs. And in some ways, if we think of this as the story of Marion, the protagonist, the narrator, this is really I think the kind of climax of her story, where she undergoes this profound alchemical transformation. She's led into an underground cavern, and there she encounters an old woman stirring a pot. And so we'll pick up with her, underground here. So she says, as I drew near the fire, the woman stopped stirring the pot and rose to greet me. When we faced each other, I felt my heart give a convulsive leap and stop. The woman who stood before me was myself. True, she was less bent than I, and so her form seemed somewhat taller. She may have been 100 years old or younger. She had no age. Her features were identical to my own, but her expression was much gayer and more intelligent. So here she meets a kind of eternal or perhaps in some sense higher version of herself. Let's see, and then continuing on just a little bit later, her double here, this kind of eternal version of herself, says, "This is hell," she said with a smile, "but hell is merely a form of terminology. Really, this is the womb of the world whence all things come." I don't think I meant to include that last sentence there. This is the womb of the world whence all things come. So here we have more development of the notion of Tartarus, the underworld, here explicitly identified with hell, but then hell is the womb of the world from which all things issue. there's a number of things that we've already talked about that resonate with that. The map of the human animal, that we looked at in, was that in part 1 or part 2? One of the 2 earlier parts of this video. This might resonate with the very bottom of that diagram, that kind of hellish realm, but is also the womb and the place of, of renewal and birth and creation. All right, a little bit later in this sort of sequence, I shuffled crabwise nearer and nearer the pot. When I was well within range, she, meaning she being her double, suddenly jabbed the pointed knife into my backside, and with a scream of pain, I leapt right into the boiling soup and stiffened in a moment of intense agony, with my companions in distress, 1 carrot and 2 onions. A mighty rumbling followed by crashes, and there I was, standing outside the pot, stirring the soup, in which I could see my own meat, feet up, boiling away as merrily as any joint of beef. So quite a morbid, but also very humorous sort of sequence here, where she's, jumped or been sort of coerced by her kind of higher self here into this pot, which is both a pot of stew as well as, very clearly a vessel of alchemical transformation. And through this kind of, you could read it as the sort of, the destruction of her limited individual self, or the giving up of the individual body, however we want to interpret it, leads her to sort of changing places and to assuming, the sort of position or perspective of this higher or kind of timeless version of herself. All right, then she continues on. From a speculative point of view, I wondered which of us I was. Knowing that I had a piece of polished obsidian somewhere in the cavern, I looked around, intending to use it as a mirror. Yes, there it was, hanging in its usual corner near the bat's nest. I looked into the mirror. First I saw the face of the abbess of Santa Barbara de Tartarus grinning at me sardonically. She faded, and then I saw the huge eyes and feelers of the queen bee, who winked and transformed herself into my own face, which looked slightly less ravaged, owing probably to the dark surface of the obsidian. So we have the queen bee here, another fairly enigmatic version of the goddess, obviously linked to the honey within the chalice. Within the Holy Grail, but yeah, the queen bee is another kind of goddess image. Let's see, continuing on. Holding this mirror at arm's length, I seemed to see a 3-faced female whose eyes winked alternatively. One of the faces was black, one red, one white, and they belonged to the abbess, the queen bee, and myself. This, of course, might have been an optical illusion. So now we have a kind of identity of the 2 main sort of figures from the novel, Marion, as well as Donna Rosalinda, who's the abbess of Santa Barbara, and now at least one version of the goddess here as well, the queen bee. Now, as we'll see, the abbess is linked to the color black, and I think the queen bee through the honey and the fact that she's the sort of divine figure here of the 3 would be linked to red, the color red, and the completion of the alchemical great work and the production of the gold, or the elixir of life, which is associated with the pneuma that in the honey that fills the grail, which links Marion to the white, forming the kind of middle position in this triad. Also, maybe resonating as well with the triple moon image that we saw there, and the triple goddess that we see in a lot of neo-pagan traditions. But yeah, also the red, white, and black, the 3 alchemical colors that we see so often in Carrington's paintings. All right, and then I just want to talk briefly about one of the more enigmatic but also complex figures that appears in the story. And this is a figure that goes by a number of different names. Sephora, who's also the Cupid from the story of Venus giving birth after drinking the pneuma from the cup. At some points, this seems to be the same figure as the horned god, the consort of the goddess. Though at other times, as we saw in that text that was supposedly translated out of Hebrew, the horned god and the winged androgyne appear to be more like separate figures. So, but at other points, it is stated that Sephora or Cupid is both the child and the kind of husband or lover of the goddess. So that would point more towards the idea of the horned god and Sephira being the same being. At one point, Sephira is also linked to the pole star. This is another thing we'll remember from the map of the human-animal diagram we saw there. We saw the appearance of the pole star. And of course, also connected here with this sort of shifting of the world, the shifting of the poles, and the changing of one age into another. And then he's also the alchemical, the winged androgyne, the product of the union of the god and the goddess, or the male and the female, and the final result of all chemical transformation. So that's quite a lot going on here. And again, he in the actual story is a fairly minor sort of figure that doesn't seem to play that much of an active role, but is obviously a very important image, but an enigmatic one. All right, so we're going to jump back to the narrative of Donna Rosalinda. This is being written by her confessor here, talking about her final days. For Donna Rosalinda, this is after this is actually like a couple of years after her journey to the stronghold of the Knights Templar, and then finally her return to the convent in Spain. Where she is obviously pregnant when she returns. For Donna Rosalinda, who had always been a thin woman, had swollen to such a monstrous size as to resemble a small whale, and she had turned coal black. Black being an alchemical reference here, as we just saw. The swelling process had attained its utmost dimension, and she slowly floated into the air, where she remained suspended for a moment. Then a sudden quaking came over the body, followed by a report louder than any known cannon, and an explosion of such violence that I was thrown against the wall. And then a little later, a short period passed before I recognized a boy, no bigger than a barn owl, luminously white and winged, that fluttered near the ceiling. He bore a bow and arrows, but the penetrating light that issued from his body prevented me from a more detailed examination. So here we have the birth of the Cupid, or his the Sephira, the winged androgyne, who may also be the horned god, being reborn into the world, because presumably Donna Rosalinda has refilled the Grail with Pneuma, or was able to consume it, and so like Venus in the mythic narrative, has given birth to this figure, but it has come, at her. This is a kind of putrefaction image through the blackening and the putrefaction. She herself has died, has sort of burst into pieces. Even the bits of her body that are left over are described as being black. So really emphasizing that alchemical reference there. But yeah, this being Sephira, or Cupid, has now re-entered the world. And then much later in the story, in the main narrative about Marion, we see Sephira once again here. So this is one of the buildings, kind of mysterious tower that exists within the grounds of the nursing home. That portion of the building suddenly glowed as if it was on fire. The great stone tower swayed from side to side, then the air was rent with the sound of a mighty cracking, and the walls split open like a broken egg. Of course, that is not just being a description of what the walls look like, but obviously a reference to the alchemical egg, one of the most common images in Carrington's work. One tongue of flame shot out from the crack like a spear, and a winged creature that might have been a bird emerged. It paused momentarily on the brim of the shattered tower, and we witnessed for a second an extraordinary creature. It shone with a bright light coming from its own body, the body of a human being entirely covered with glittering feathers and armless. 6 great wings sprouted from its body and quivered, ready for flight. Then, with a shrill, long laugh, it leaped into the air and flew north till it was lost to our sight. The flying north may also be, connected to the pole star, which marks due north, though the poles have also moved here. But yeah, now we see kind of another very clear alchemical image of the winged, androgyne being born out of the alchemical egg here. All right, and then we'll move into our final section here. for talking about the hearing trumpet and look at the restoration of the Grail to the goddess and the renewal of the earth, the return of the goddess, and the possibility of life continuing on the earth. So I'll look for just a kind of handful of different quotes, mostly from towards the end of the narrative, though a few drawn from a little bit early on to develop this theme a little bit. All right, so here a little bit earlier in the narrative, we read that the Great Mother cannot return to this planet until the cup is restored to her filled with pneuma and under the guard of her consort, the horned god. Another character, Christabel, who's another one of the women in the nursing home, who's also has quite a bit of esoteric knowledge. She's the one who possesses the narrative of Dona Rosalinda, and she's also conducts some sort of magical or spiritual ceremonial rites connected to the planet Venus. Let's see. So she says, "We must make immediate plans to recover the Grail and restore it to the goddess," said Christabel. Her flight after the atomic war was the final nail in the coffin of this generation. If the planet is to survive with organic life, she must be induced to return, so that goodwill and love can once more prevail in the world. So again, we see one of the few other references to the fact that a nuclear war has occurred within this world, and that this was the final nail in the coffin. All right, and then another quotation here. I'm actually not remembering the exact context of this, but in any case, developing some of what we've already seen. So we read, "Worshippers of the revengeful Father God were of course determined to keep the Grail in their possession, and a small nucleus of initiates knew the magic of the cup. These special initiates knew that their hypnotic power over humanity could not endure if the Great Mother was once more in possession." So now we read that the powers of this patriarchal authority, that their ability to dominate and hypnotize the world will end if the cup is returned to the Great Mother. So here we have, I think, interesting that idea of the hypnotic power, being what governments exercise over their people, is now also directly linked to this patriarchal order of spiritual authority that the characters in the narrative are attempting to overthrow. So we have almost a kind of anarcho sort of feminist idea linking political and social domination to the patriarchal order. But also connecting it to this real alchemical spiritual magical dimension as well, which I think is a really powerful joining of ideas and concepts here. All right, and then I had to shorten this. This is a kind of long sequence where the Marion and Carmela and the other women perform a ritual that summons the Zampalum, who is the queen bee that we already saw there in the underground chamber. So now their ritual has succeeded. And so we read that the air was filled with a humming and drumming of wings, and millions of bumblebees gathered over our heads and formed a great female figure over the boiling cauldron. The swarm shimmered and shook in the formation of the giantess. "Speak, Zampalum," cried Christabel. "Zampalum, speak. Open your heart of wild honey and tell us how to capture your most holy grail, that earth shall not die on her axis. Speak, Zampalum." The figure buzzed and shimmered. Then somewhere from the depths of the body, made from so many millions of bees, came a voice so unbearably sweet that we felt drowned in honey. "Bees shall nest again in the lion's carcass. So my cup will be filled with honey, and I shall drink again with the horned god, Sephira, the pole star, my husband and my son. Follow the swarm." So here we have the actual appearance and speech of the goddess, here composed of a swarm of bees. We also have this, reminding us of the map of the human animal. We have the reference to the bees nesting in the lion's carcass here. The biblical reference that we talked about in the last part there. All right, and then also in this same scene, we have, a character who had just been introduced right before, who comes kind of out of nowhere. We have Anubis, whose name is obviously kind of a play on Anubis, the Egyptian jackal-headed deity. This is Anubis, the High Queen of the Wolves, who's a woman with the head of a wolf, who appears rather suddenly into the narrative, along with other werewolves and her sort of wolf pack kin. So now she appears in the circle as well and speaks to the goddess. She says, "I am Anubis, High Queen of the Wolves. My people wish to offer themselves to recover your most holy cup, great goddess Hecate Zampalum," she said in wolvery, that being apparently the language of the wolves. The goddess hummed with a million voices, and drops of honey fell like manna from the roof of the cavern. We were covered with a most delicious perfumed stickiness, and were obliged to lick ourselves clean. All right, and then jumping a little further ahead to basically the end of the novel here, we have the actual scene, which is unfolds rather quickly and somewhat anticlimactically, of the actual return of the Grail, which was being held by a group of Christian or Catholic clergy. Let's see, so we read that this is how the goddess reclaimed her holy cup, with an army of bees, wolves, 7 old women, a postman, a Chinaman, a poet, an atom-driven ark, and a werewoman. The strangest army, perhaps, ever seen on this planet. So we haven't talked about all these characters, but this is the final group that is assembled, who are all allied together, humans and non-humans, and a very kind of motley, diverse, strange crew that all kind of join together in this quest to restore the Grail to the goddess. And then they come up with a plan for how to recover it, and then execute that plan. And then we read, all worked according to plan. The Archbishop himself, so they pretend, all the women start yelling and screaming as if they pretend to be like as if the wolves are attacking them, so that the Archbishop and the priests will run out to help them. So all worked according to plan. The Archbishop himself ran downstairs to open the door as soon as we all started shrieking. Propelled by a supernatural intelligence, the swarm of bees, this is the same swarm that had formed into the figure of the goddess Zampalum there. Propelled by a supernatural intelligence, the swarm of bees whirled into the house and returned in a few moments carrying the Holy Grail, which they bore off to some secret part of our cavern, leaving a trail of honey in their wake, which glittered like gold on the snow. So I think the fact that it happens so quickly, and that it is the bees, this kind of supernatural divine agency that actually reclaims the Grail, is significant. That it's not, we don't get Marion as in a kind of like hero's journey sort of narrative, who's the one to seize the Grail and return it. That she participates, along with this the strangest army ever seen on this planet. She takes her place as just one among many. Even that alchemical transformation that she went through, where she sees herself identified both with the abbess, Donna Rosalinda, as well as the queen bee, it's revealed that all the other women went through the same ceremony and saw the same, their own face, plus the face of the abbess and the queen bee in the mirror as well, so that that experience of renewal and the identification with those forces is not unique to her. Which I think this kind of subverting or eluding of the sort of heroic, which is a very male sort of heroic story, is definitely significant here. And the fact that it's the bees, this non-human agency that is able to reclaim the Grail directly is important to notice. All right, and then wrapping up our discussion of the hearing trumpet here, we've got our final quotation from the very last page of the book. We read, "Ice ages pass, and although the world is frozen over, we suppose someday grass and flowers will grow again. In the meantime, I keep a daily record on 3 wax tablets. After I die, Anubis werecubs will continue the document, till the planet is peopled with cats, werewolves, bees, and goats. We all fervently hope that this will be an improvement on humanity, which deliberately renounced the pneuma of the goddess." All right, so because the cup has been returned, full of pneuma, has been returned to the goddess, there will be renewal. The cataclysm still happens, the ice age still comes, but there is this promise or this knowledge that the earth will be green again, and that life will return, and that the renewal is assured because of the return of the goddess to the earth. But we also have revealed here that something that had not been previously said explicitly in the novel, that as the Earth continues, humanity will no longer be a part of it, that humanity will die out here. So I think it would be possible to read this in a very pessimistic sort of way, that there's simply no place for humanity in a regenerated Earth, and that the Earth would simply be better off without us. Now, that's an idea that I'm sure is actually a lot more common nowadays than it was at the time that Carrington wrote this wrote this novel. Things like the sort of antinatalist movement, or that idea of voluntary human extinction, is something that, is actually not incredibly uncommon nowadays. And that perception that, the best thing we could do for the Earth would be to just voluntarily go extinct, and for the Earth to just not have any humans on it. I think the thing that complicates that reading is the presence of the werewolves here. That it's not simply cats, bees, and goats, that it's not simply the non-human animals that already exist that will populate the future world, but we'll also have these human-animal hybrids, these wolf-human hybrids will be part of the new order here. And I think, one way we could maybe read or think about that presence of human hybrids in the new order is that this is a kind of image of what Carrington elsewhere calls the human animal, a humanity that is no longer human in the sense of the human as non-animal or something separate from the natural world, but humans who fully and completely understand themselves as animals and as just one species among many, not the center, or the pinnacle, not the masters of the earth, but simply one animal species among others, and the fantastic, magic and plurality and diversity of all the life on Earth. That would maybe be a kind of hopeful, way of reading some hope for humanity's future into this narrative, would be the possibility that we could, sort of metaphorically, become werewolves and stop being, humans. Again, in the sense of something separate and apart from, the rest of the natural world and the other species that we share this planet with. All right, so we will close out this video looking at how to make a surrealist survival kit. But before we do that, I just wanted to quickly go over some suggested further readings. So if you're interested in Carrington's writings, we've mentioned most of her major writings, the Down Below, The Stone Door, and The Hearing Trumpet being her three, I think, major, longer written works. We also mentioned a couple of her stories. There's a lot of other really interesting short stories that we didn't mention. All of her short stories are available in the Complete Stories of Leonora Carrington, which concludes the two story collections that she published during her life, as well as 3 or 4 unpublished stories as well. Those are published by the New York Review of Books, the NYRB, in 2017, who have, the NYRB has also been doing republications of all of Carrington's major works, and they're nice editions. I have a few older editions of a few of these things, but the newer NYRB editions are nice, and some of them even include some pretty useful forewords and afterwords, like the afterword to the new edition of The Stone Door is pretty useful. And it's also just really nice that all these texts are easily and available and affordable again. And as I just found out that NYRB is going to be doing a publication of the selected plays of Carrington as well, which I'm really looking forward to. I've never read any of her plays, so I'm definitely looking forward to that coming out in about 5 or 6 months from now. As we've mentioned, there's also a few essays and things like that were published in different surrealist journals over time. In particular, the important essay, What is a Woman? I don't know if there's enough there to really be able to be do a collected edition of her nonfiction writings, but I definitely recommend tracking down What is a Woman, which is not too difficult to find, but definitely a really important essay of hers there. For her visual art, there's a lot of exhibition catalogs. There's been a lot of renewed attention on Carrington in the last 10, maybe 15 years or so. And so there's been a lot of big kind of international exhibitions and things like that. So there's should be lots of exhibition catalogs available. Definitely if you just want to see reproductions of her work, I don't know, just go to your local library and check out whatever exhibition catalogs they have available there. Would be my recommendation. Of course, you can find lots of images online as well, but it can be nice to have a printed catalog. For secondary works, there's two in particular that I would recommend. The first one, and the one I definitely most highly recommend, is Susan Aberth's book, Leonora Carrington, Surrealism, Alchemy, and Art, which is a really important pioneering study of the esotericism and its presence in Carrington's work. So I think it's definitely a really, really important study of Carrington there from Susan Aberth, who we've mentioned a few times before as who I think of anyways as the most important scholar of Carrington's work. Also another book, this one might be a little bit harder to find, but if you can find a copy of Surreal Friends on Leonora Carrington, Remedios Varo, and Cathy Horna, that's a really interesting book too, and there's an essay or two there that goes into some detail about Carrington and Varro's esoteric, their actual practices and magical and other kind of experiments that they did in their life, which I found really useful. I managed to find it at a library. So yeah, definitely look for that if you can. Also, any other either longer works or essays by either Susan Aberth or there's another scholar named Teresa Ark, who sometimes goes by, I don't know how she pronounces it, but T-E-R-E, like Terry maybe. Her work is also quite useful as well. So yeah, anything by either of them is definitely recommended. I also just wanted to mention a few books just briefly that I found myself thinking about a lot as I was thinking about Carrington and some of the themes and ideas presented in her stories. And so if you were, just really, really interested in Carrington and wanting to look at some works that maybe develop ideas that really resonate with a lot of Carrington's own ideas, I would recommend a few books. First of these, a book that's really important to me and that I would definitely like to do a whole video on at some point in the future is Carolyn Merchant's book, The Death of Nature, Women, Ecology, and the Scientific Revolution, which it's not obvious from the title, but has quite a lot to do with the Western esoteric tradition and the transforming ideas of nature and the world. And there's a really very powerful ecofeminist kind of perspective really woven into that whole work. So definitely really highly recommended. Another book that's really important to me and I think resonates with a lot of sort of Carrington's ideas and especially maybe develops some of the kind of nascent sort of political implications of some of Carrington's ideas as well is Sylvia Federici's book, Caliban and the Witch. Another book that we can maybe do a full-length video about it at some time. I think that's a really important book. And then finally, there's a scholar, Ronald Hutton, a number of his books on the modern pagan movement and goddess traditions. And, one thing I think worth being aware of that we've already sort of mentioned is some of the writings and the traditions that Carrington is drawing on are now understood to not be historically accurate about the history of witchcraft or the survival of pagan and goddess-centered religious organizations within Europe, during the Christian era. But I think Ronald Hutton does a really nice job of both overturning mistaken ideas from those movements while still, I think, being respectful and of the real, genuine, heartfelt, spirituality and the important, messages and ideas contained within them. So yeah, there's definitely a bunch of his books I think are really worth reading, but in particular, I would suggest Queens of the Wild, Pagan Goddesses in Christian Europe, an Investigation, which I think has some really nice resonances with a lot of Carrington's works there as well. All right, and then last thing we'll do is talk about how to make your own surrealist survival kit. All right, so this is an excerpt from a collection of essays by Penelope Rosemont, someone we've mentioned before in this video and in the longer video on surrealism that I did. And we talked about Rosemont knowing Carrington personally when Carrington lived in Chicago. So here's a bit from an essay in Rosemont's book, Surrealism Inside the Magnetic Fields. So she's recounting a conversation that she and Leonora had, where she had been telling Leonora about when she was a kid and she used to collect together all different, sort of special or kind of magical sort of objects into a kind of, kit together. Well, Leonora laughed and said, "Yes, I did that too, but what we really need now is a surrealist survival kit." And we had much fun deciding what would go into our surrealist survival kit. She spoke frequently of the urgent need for this special piece of equipment, the surrealist survival kit, which is described by Kenneth Cox in the wonderful book What Will Be as a, quote, collection of poetic, magical, talismanic objects, images, and other favorite things. A kit could include, for example, a pebble, a feather, a bird's egg, a piece of wood, a chunk of coral, a bead, a shell, a bit of colored glass, a painting the size of a postage stamp, a poem by Benjamin Paret, a "Let There Be Wolves" sticker. Every item small enough to keep in a cloth sack children keep marbles in. Its purpose, to offset the destructive effects of daily life, to pull us through the hardest times, to reawaken our sense of wonder and renew our capacity for dream and action. Designed to function symbolically, each would be different, for no two people are exactly alike. Overcome by demoralization and defeat, depressed or suicidal, then is the time to open one's surrealist survival kit and enjoy a breath of magical fresh air, to lay out its marvelous contents carefully before oneself, one by one, and let the objects and images play together, arrange them, rearrange them, enter the play with them, relaxing and soothing as well as exhilarating and reinvigorating. In other words, just what every surrealist needs. All right, so at long last, that wraps us up talking about Leonora Carrington. This has taken longer than I had hoped for, and hopefully I'll be back in not too much time with something else. So I really appreciated this opportunity to look at and really think about Carrington's work in a lot of depth. She's someone that's been, really personally important to me and a source of inspiration for a long time now. So yeah, I was glad to have this opportunity to try to assemble some of my thoughts and reflect on her work. Hopefully that was useful or interesting for you as well. And yeah, I'll be back soon with another video on, I'm not sure exactly what it'll be yet, but yeah, stay tuned for more in the Occulture series. And I'll also be starting a new series relatively soon. The Occulture series will remain kind of an open-ended thing that I'll add to from time to time, but also starting to look at more directly at esoteric material and the esoteric and hermetic traditions. So yeah, stay tuned for all that in the next kind of coming weeks.